Hello, viewers. This is James Floyd Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Novel Ideas. I'm here with my friend Erik Wecks. Erik, we're going to have to change the opening sequence to say a weekly because we've been making this pretty consistent now.
We have, but the problem is I haven't been posting them necessarily.
Okay. Well, we weren't supposed to say it. You're right.
Weekly.
And we'll keep it that way. Almost.
I got busy last week, so.
Well, how's your week going?
My week's been great. I am excited for today's conversation. So
yeah, I am too.
Well,
then let's get right to it. Viewers, we have a very special guest with us today. As you know, Erik and I write for GeekDad.com. Well, there is a sister site called GeekMom.com, and we have one of the writers for Geek Mom who also is a writer. Her name is Natania Barron, and she is with us today. And hi, Natania.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks.
So, Natania, obviously we talk about writing, so we're going to hit you with some questions about writing, and I'm going to ask you your first question. Erik, I'm going to jump in here. I'm just going to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are as a writer and what kind of books you write, things like that?
Sure, absolutely. I've been a writer most of my life since I was about 12 when I started rewriting huge amounts of Stephen King's books and putting myself in them because I thought that was a good idea. So that was definitely my my toe tip into the water to see what that was like. Probably didn't start writing my own real original stuff until I was about 17 or 18. But my first finished novel was somewhere in my mid-20s, but I didn't publish until I was 30, but that was my goal. So I typically write, I call it, sometimes New Gothic or Neo-Victorian. I do a lot of Lovecraftian stuff in my short fiction. My short fiction is definitely closer to horror. I like creepy golems and things made out of flesh and strange things that, my husband says, you hate horror movies, but you write the creepiest stuff. So, you have two kids, weird things happen. So, most of what
I get that.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Like, I write stuff, and I will walk away and I'm like, I am so horrible to my characters. I would never watch this in a film.
Yeah.
But absolutely. I love writing it.
Yeah, and I don't really know where it comes from, but I kind of embrace it. I like to think that it's sort of mental rearranging. But my first novel was Pilgrim of the Sky, and that was sort of a steampunk myth punk. So it kind of took Greek gods and recast them as sort of almost Avatar-like creatures that are reborn in sort of an alternate history world. So that was my first novel, and I've written a lot since then.
So I want to follow up on something you said early on in that you spent 5 years where you were rewriting Stephen King with yourself and other people in it?
Yeah, I mean, not just Stephen King. I did it with movies. So I rewrote probably 10,000 words of The Stand. So it was my favorite book between the ages of like 12 and 15. So I went through and I added myself as a character. So I would take scenes that he wrote and like retool them and stuff. Yeah, it was.
You do realize what fabulous training that was.
It was, and I really love Stephen King, although I joke that I learned more about sex from Stephen King than my own parents, which is probably a little bit problematic. But I definitely had the house where like they didn't care what I was reading. So I mean, it was just books, right? So not from a family of readers, my close friends, my close parents. But
it's not that they didn't care what you were reading; they didn't know what you were reading.
Yeah, and I was also obsessed with the Old West. So I loved the Young Guns movies. So I was born in '81. So the mid '90s was kind of like the cool time for me for all those lovely films starring Emilio Estevez. So I rewrote a huge portion of that, and then tried sort of to write my own stories, but it was very awkward.
I'm like thinking this is something I want to recommend. Like, because every once in a while I'll be at a library or something, I'll do something where teens are there. I think that's fantastic as a way to get trained because you're learning plotting structure, you're learning characterization, you're learning world building, all that stuff just by rewriting somebody. I mean, that's something I actually wrote that down. I want to transcribe like the first 3 or 4 chapters of Old Man in the Sea because I'm really trying to change the language style right now, and that's just so lovely and so sparse and so to the point. And I would love to be able to imitate that. So even as a professional writer, I still think transcribing is a fantastic way to learn, right? It's a fantastic way to pick up voice.
I think for me it was just really fun. I did the same thing with The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton, and I thought, because I mean she has the opening chapter, she just kind of describes every character in a paragraph, and I thought for years that's how you had to start your book. You had to sit down and then for like 6 pages describe eye color, height, hair color, any interesting facial characteristics. You kind of internalize it and you think, oh, this is how everyone does it. But yeah.
Yes, everyone should have 4 chapters about a birthday party. and then go start the adventure and then stop and write a chapter of poetry in the middle of it. That's the way all books start, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Natania, I have a question. Again, something you said triggered it. You said that you wrote this story in your 20s, but you shelved it for a while, and then came back and published it at age 30.
No. So I didn't actually publish that book. So I actually technically, so I will say my first finished novel, I rewrote that I think 6 times, and it still was a trunk novel. There's no way around it. As much as I tried, didn't happen. The follow-up to that I actually did self-publish. So a lot of people I know will have heard the podcast I did called The Aldersgate Cycle, and it's sort of a weird West steampunk fantasy. And that was my first. That was a sort of self-published. I did a podcast of that. And that kind of helped me. This is around 2006, 2007, so really helped me kind of meet people. You know, Twitter kind of exploded right after that, so I got to connect with writers all over the place, which was really, really cool. And just that opportunity of putting my stuff out there at that point. I've been writing so much in the dark for so long. My aim for that podcast was really just to see what people would say, and I was expecting people to really critique it, but people just wanted to follow along the story. So that's when I wrote Pilgrim of the Sky, which I really wanted to be an indie book. That was really my focus, was something small press to kind of cut my teeth on, and it was such a wonderful experience, that whole project.
Did you write that in installments so that people were following as you were writing chapter by chapter, or?
For the podcast, no. I actually wrote it was another one of those. I think I wrote 3 full drafts before I actually read it out loud. And I would sort of edit the chapter as I was doing it, and then I would read it. And a lot of times in that reading, I mean, I have a theater background, so I perform everything I do. So tons of reading out loud. It was kind of part of my process anyway. This was before my kid was like a loud, alarm 24/7. So I would kind of, after I did that first pass edit and read it through a couple times, I would post it on iTunes and people would listen. So
Erik, do you read your stuff out loud to hear it, to hear your voice?
I actually ask my wife or daughter to read it to me, and that's my very first line. We call it dailies, just like a movie around here. We actually do dailies quite often, and it doesn't always happen. And there's not that, but that's the best way for me to get into it, is to hear it, and especially if I hear it from somebody else and they stumble, then we stop and we go, okay, was that you or was that a problem with the text? And I think that's a really great way to edit.
So can you tell us a little bit about your current writing strategy? Like, do you write daily? Do you write when the whim hits you?
Yeah, I've had to really adapt in the last couple of years. So right after my first book came out, and the Geek Mom book came out right on the tails of that, I had a baby daughter. So I have a 9-year-old almost and an almost 3-year-old, and little kids are really not conducive to the kind of writing that I was doing before. Even with just one kid, I had a lot more free time. Well, now I had a 6-year-old and a baby, and it was very, very challenging. So I really struggled for a couple of years trying to write the same way I always had before, which were these big spurts, and I would kind of pants everything, and whatever happened. I just didn't have enough time to think about it. Like I wanted to write, but so much of my brain, working full time and trying to do all these other things, was just not there. So it really took me until Glassmere, the book I'm writing right now, I've actually been working on for close to 5 years in my head. I've had my first Pinterest board was of this book. So it takes place in 1914, and I would often get caught up on China patterns, make sure that is the cup they're drinking on, could it have a clover? And if it was a clover, what company made it? And, kind of getting lost in those weeds. I also have been working on a collaborative novel with my friend Jonathan Wood, and he's a 7-point plotter, and he really, really taught me how to kind of step back and look at the process from a different perspective. That way, you're not actually have a whiteboard right here that I just erased last night because I finished everything on here.
Are you talking about the ex-hero writer?
Yeah.
I don't know Jonathan Wood, but I love his books.
Yes, absolutely.
I didn't know. He's you sort of partner up with him and
for NaNoWriMo we're about 80% of the way through on the novel that we've been working together. This is a very weird fantasy novel. But
I'm going to ship my books to you and have you ship them to him to autograph them all and then send them back.
He's actually one of my first Twitter friends that was a writer. We both have kids, and we're both total geeks, and we both love Dragon Age. So we've had this long, friendly correspondence. And we said, hey, why don't we try something together? But what was really cool is that I sort of taught him to get away a little bit from his outline and kind of just see what happens. And so meanwhile, he's all excited about that, and I'm excited because I know what I'm going to write tonight.
I like his. I mean, his series. I think he's up to 3 books now. His hero series is great. If you're a Lovecraft, fan like I am, and you are.
Lovecraft and MI5, it's fantastic stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but when I heard that name, I was like, wait a minute.
That's awesome. He'll be so chuffed to hear this. I'll have to tell him because he's the most politely British guy in the whole world, but he'll be name dropped and he'll love that. But yeah, so it really, really taught me to not be afraid of an outline. And a lot of times my outline doesn't work and things do happen, but I'm able to get so much more done in a short amount of time. I generally can't write. I also have carpal tunnel, so I have to write very slowly and super ergonomically and everything. So generally I don't write more than about 2,000 words a day. But now, because I'm scheduling it so specifically, I find that when I'm at the computer, I know my goals for the day. I'm so much more focused that my drafts are a lot cleaner. There's a lot less of this kind of like floundering around looking for the right word. My novel goes back and forth right now between 2 of the main characters, 2 young girls. So I'm not afraid of not having something there, and I'm not, it's turned out really a far more like rewarding process, just because I'm adapting, and I know that I failed the other way and it's okay. So I rebuilt it and it's still working.
So Erik, are you? They go long today.
Yeah, we should go long.
I've got more questions for.
Yeah, so do I. This is good. So my question is, are you discovery writing characters, or because this is the process Brandon Sanderson says he uses. He's a big outliner for plot, but he discovery writes his characters. So what'll happen is he'll get to a certain point where he's begun to voice his main characters, and they get a veto on the plot. So the outline falls apart because suddenly you're realizing that's not what that person would do in this circumstance, and so he ends up in the middle re-outlining. And when I heard it, I was like, yes, that's my process too, right? Is I get about 20 or 30,000 words into a 100,000 word novel, and then I'm like, wait, stop. That where I thought I was going, and it's usually beginning of Act 2, right? Where I thought I was going is not what's going to happen here, and then I have to re-outline the rest of it. So
yeah, I mean I tried to do, and that's the cool thing about. There's a great post, and I can pull it up for you and share it, that Jonathan wrote about the 7-point plot, and that's the nice part, is that he has these 7-point plots, but also these little pinches all along the way. And I find that the 7 points don't change so much for me,
right.
But it's the little pinches that change. So I'm at 30,000 words right now in Glassmere. I am literally exactly what you said. I had everything so well put together, and then it just kind of went, oh no, now there's this whole other thing I didn't even plan to do. But on the other hand, I disagree, because for me anyway, character always comes first. Character is my gravy. I mean, I'm sitting there putting outfits together on Pinterest and making sure that their jewelry matches for the event that I'm going to write. I mean, it's pretty crazy how deep that goes for me. Like the color palette, the words that they use, the ways that they think and put words together. So for me in this particular novel, it's been brewing for so long that motivations and characters are pretty solid. Although I will say, initially it was going to have one single point of view from she's 18 years old. Her name's Eleanor, and it was going to be her story. And then I have a sister who's 3 years younger than me, and then my grandmother and great aunt are in their 80s, and they're 3 years apart. So we had this interesting mirroring in my family, and I wanted to kind of incorporate that, but I wanted to really mix it up. And what I found was that I had to tell Julia, the younger sister, had to have a voice. And it's so important for sisters, because 2 people can have the most fraught relationships, and it's crazy. It's crazy that people who love each other and grow up with each other can just hold so much tension. So I had to tell both sides. I hadn't been expecting that. So that was literally chapter 2. I said, oh no, wait, it's Julia's turn. And she's actually turned into my favorite character to write. I kind of jumbled them up so they're not exactly recognizable as my sister and I, but it's been really, really fun that way. But it's got to be fun, because I mean, if it's everything is expected, then to me that's not, the process is the journey,
Right. So you've brewed on your characters for so long that when you walked into the novel, you had them kind of well voiced in your head already.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I had a little bit of stage fright. I've had some scenes that have been so long in there, and it's funny because one of my beta readers said, I feel like you can't tell if you were going to tell or show this. I was like, you saw right through me. I was so nervous. I was so I just had performance anxiety because it was so solidified in my head, and having had it for so long. So yeah, it was kind of funny that people can see through that part.
Yeah.
My pleasure. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead, Erik.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Um, well, Natania, we do talk a lot about here on publishing, indie versus traditional. Can you talk about a little bit about your publishing background? You've said the word indie in the conversation, so let's come back to that.
Sure. So, I mean, I would consider that my first book, The Alder's Gate, was self-published. It never became print necessarily, but it was certainly, I released it as a podcast, and it's out there in the world, and people have read it. Didn't make any money out of it, but hey, it was a great experience. My second novel, Pilgrim of the Sky, which is considered my debut novel, which I think is actually like my sixth novel. I forget how you actually add it all together. It's kind of crazy. But that was through a small publisher called Candlemark and Gleam out of Vermont, and I had actually seen my friend Laura Ann Gilman tweeted about an open call for unusual fantasy novels, and I had submitted it to another publisher who seemed to really like it, and then kind of wasn't really sure what they thought of it, and I kind of decided that was not a good route to go. But when I sent it to Kate over at Candlemark and Gleam, she immediately got what I was trying to do, and I got the wonderful experience of having her be this. Having an editor is like having a friend within your novel who understands what you're trying to do, and she was able to tease out stuff that I never would have thought to put in there. And I mean, the book is what it is, and its follow-up is what it is, because I can still hear Kate in the back of my head. She has an amazing gift for understanding characters and motivations, and it's a complicated book. It's not an easy sell. I knew there was no way anyone was going to pick it up from a big publisher. But the people that have resonated with it really loved it and got what I was trying to do, and that was really the most important part. And then, of course, I've experienced a Big Six book because the Geek Mom book was published through Pottercraft, which is part of Random House, which is a totally different experience. And overall, I would say I really loved the hands-on approach of the indie publishers. It was a beautiful, rewarding experience for me.
Gotcha. Your turn, Erik. If not,
so where like now there's so many reasons to write, and there's so many plans for a career. When you think about the future, is this, I want to write about seller? Are you comfortable being with the small indie press? I mean, you say you like that experience better, so I'm wondering, is it I would rather stay under the radar so I don't get picked up by the Big Four, or do you want to get picked up by the Big Four at this point?
You know, I think that's almost, to me, at this point, irrelevant. Part of it is because I realize how little it really impacts the bottom line. I mean, even people who are bestsellers, it's so short-lived. It's not a means to an end. It's going to be a difficult run no matter what. I think I've really focused in the last few years on getting better, on writing better, and pushing myself. And I'm hoping, I mean, I know, Glassmere has this great elevator pitch. Downton Abbey meets Narnia. It's like super easy. People get it right away. I'm hoping that it is more appealing than my debut novel, which was not intended to be something that I would shop around. But I've really kind of waited. I experienced that a lot when I was first writing, is that I felt like even as I was writing a book, I was improving as a writer so fast that I couldn't maintain the whole novel. It was like by the time I got halfway through, the beginning felt completely wrong, and then I'd have to rewrite it again, but I'd run into the same problem. So I feel like I've gotten my chops down, but it's really a matter of pushing myself and asking the really hard questions, and knowing, I have a tendency, I love description, but I love conversation. I tend to write things densely. I'm trying to open things up, be more airy, drop things in. This has kind of got, the current novel has all kinds of gothic undertones. People say that it reminds them of, some of the Bronte's work and things like that. So I'm an English major myself, so I'm always trying to pull in these other threads and make sure I'm part of that conversation. So if it ends up, being a great big thing, that's awesome. But I can't not write. I don't know how. So aside from, I even used dictation software when it got so bad before. So it's just not an option for me.
I resonate a lot with what you just said. I think that I feel like I've been improving so fast that I look back on the stuff that I wrote earlier, and I'm just not sure who that is. And I think that focus on improvement has really served me well. This year, I haven't written fiction since December, when I finished up the 10-part Gradlander serial on Geek Dad. That's not quite true. I've written a short story here or there, but I haven't focused on fiction, and that break has been fantastic. And I am a week away from finishing up the workbook for my financial book and being done with nonfiction for a while and finally getting back to fiction. And I'm so ready. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to bring some of the voice and skill stuff that I've learned to the novel that I'm writing right now, because that novel has become something. It's funny because I started the novel Gossamer as purely a marketing thing, because I was like, I'm very frustrated. Male science fiction readers aren't getting what I'm writing, and yet I'm strictly I'm pretty firmly in space opera and military science fiction, so it's hard for me to bring female readers in. I'm going to write something that's going to sell. Who's buying books? 14-year-old girls. Okay, 14-year-old girl who's genetically modified in a bioterror attack. Great, I can do that. And it started out as just this pure kind of like marketing stuff, and it's because it's just this project that I care about very, very deeply, and it's made me stop and slow down and improve my craft. And I'm going right back to the beginning and almost starting with outlining, redoing the whole thing come here in May. So I'm looking forward to that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's slowing down is really important for me. I have to be reading while I'm writing. There's this complete correlation, and sometimes I think I don't have time, but then I realize, wow, no wonder I haven't written all week. I haven't read anything, and I read all over the place. And this year I read The Scarlet Pimpernel. I read all of Jeff Vandermeer's Annihilation series, the Southern Reach series. I read all kinds of other things that don't even relate to what I'm writing, but I feel like opening yourself up means that you can let more out. It's kind of this, it's a crazy thing, and I'm always trying to scold myself when I realize, like, stop moving, you didn't read anything. So I've just started The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, so really enjoying that so far too. So yeah, I have to plug that.
Well, I'll tell you what, Erik,
James will like this. I'm reading The Engines of God right now, so there you are, Jack McDevitt.
McDevitt, my favorite. Hey, listen, we're running out of time here. We're getting very close.
Sure.
Natania, let me tell you what I'd like to do is extend an invite to come back. Maybe 3 months, 6 months, however long, whenever you feel you're ready. But maybe there'll become a point where you feel you can come back and talk about something that's going on, whether it's getting Glassmere finished up or maybe starting on another story or whatever. But we'd like to have you come back if you're open to that.
I'm happy to.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Viewers, if you have any questions or comments about this session, please post them on geekdad.com or go to erikwecks.com. If you have, and they can be questions directly for Natania. That's fine. We'll pass them on, no problem. But if you have any suggestions for future episodes, future topics, we're all ears. Let us know. We'll see what we can do. But we do hope that you enjoyed listening to Natania. I have some additional questions, Natania, but you know what? I'm going to just make a note, and I'll have to hit them next time.
Sure.
So I will post Natania's social media stuff in the notes on YouTube. So if you're for that, we can get that to you there.
Yeah, we'll get links up to your books and other stuff. So Natania will get us some information on her so that you can find her. And Natania, just thanks again for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
No
That's
problem.
fine.
Erik, we'll talk again next week. Okay.
We will talk again next week.
All right.
I'm
Y'all
looking
take
forward
care.
to it. All right. Bye.